My name is Don Taylor, and welcome to PLP Pathways webinar number 5. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about how students can demonstrate competence and responsibility through partnership curriculum design, authentic project-based learning, and negotiated curriculum. And PLP Pathways, our program and our mission is to help other teachers and educators around the state develop programming related to Act 77. Our work is supported by the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education and the Middle Grades Collaborative. And just I want to put a plug in there that this Saturday, on January 12th at the Davis Center at UVM, we're going to be attending the Middle Grades Conference, which is a great way to learn about what folks are doing at the middle grades level, but also to get really interested and kind of psyched up for the second part of the school year. I'd like my contributors, my co-contributors, to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with our webinar.
Hi, I'm Meg O'Donnell from the Alpha team at Shelburne Community School.
Hi, I'm Maura Wheeler. I'm the Proficiency-Based Learning and Technology Integration Coach at Lamoille South Supervisory Union.
Hi, I'm Kevin Peely-Hunt. I'm a 5A journalist in Swift House at Wilson Central School.
Okay, and Meg, do you want to kind of talk us through the first part, the what of our webinar?
Sure. You know, although I was just reading through that, and I know that Lindsay probably has some an additional perspective on that in her new position with being up. But I can talk about the importance of student partnership in terms of developing curriculum with kids. I'm going to be totally transparent about this in that it's challenging, and it's one of the things that I think can quickly get eaten away as we start to move towards the other agendas that we have to uphold, and which makes it all the more critical to do. So I can talk about my own experience on the Alpha team and how student negotiated curriculum has evolved over the years. We essentially, the bottom line is it's partnering with students to develop curriculum. It's asking students, what are they wondering about? What are they curious about? What are their concerns? And then taking that information and embedding it naturally into the curriculum that you're asking kids to engage in. And there is a continuum of it, right? Like it can just be as simple as as asking that question and asking those questions and seeing where it fits into your work, to fully developing curriculum with kids, where kids are leading. This is what we want to study. These are the resources that we're going to use. This is how we want to demonstrate our learning. These are the field experiences that we want to have as a part of this learning. On our team, regardless of how it's evolved over the years, we've always still maintained asking kids to generate self and world questions. We start with this is the Jim Bean model from many years ago, and it was pretty much has been a cornerstone for our team. By asking students first to think about questions that they have about themselves and questions they have about their world, and then looking for what is common among them, the process isn't about asking these questions with the guarantee that we're going to answer those questions. It's about asking those questions to get a sense as to what's on their mind. What are they worried about personally and individually? And what are the concerns that they have about the world and the place around them? And in years past, we would literally take those questions and sort them into categories that were common, and then use that to develop our themes. When we needed to show demonstration of being more accountable to standards and to content and learning targets and GEs and GLEs, we ended up taking their questions and matching them with the content that we were expected to address in a given cycle of we have our students for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, so it's a 3-year cycle. What I love about their questions is, what I love about this process is that at any point in the year, we just the other day, we started this this book group discussions on dystopian literature. And so I asked kids, I wasn't anticipating that we were going to use their self and world questions in this way, but I asked them to go back to their world questions after we had unpacked a little bit about what is utopia and dystopia. And so many of their questions lent themselves naturally to this idea of what's the ideal? What are the big ideas that I'm wondering about? Why can't we end world poverty? How can we enforce, like, listening to these words, when you think about the idea of dystopia, it's like, how can we enforce a more accepting community and world? So it's like they want so much to, they're just grappling with these big ideas, and we can go back and refer to those and lean on those questions to help steer the direction that we want to go in together. So I'm not sure that gets at the, like, there's Linz. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, sorry.
So that sort of just gets at the idea of how students' self and world questions might get into this idea of curriculum. I'm going to let Lindsay or someone else maybe talk better about how that steers to project-based learning. So, Linz, we just sort of jumped into the agenda about kind of answering what is negotiated curriculum. And I just was talking about the examples of how Alpha's done it over the years. But I really appreciated some of the thoughts that you had, and I want to make sure you have a chance to talk to those things when you're ready.
Sure. Do you want to continue with the negotiated curriculum part, Meg, and then we can return back to this youth adult partnership piece? What makes most sense?
I think it makes sense to, unless anyone else has a different idea, I think maybe just hearing other examples of how teachers use negotiated curriculum, and then, Linz, maybe we can go back to sort of that more theory idea that you have.
And can I jump in for just 1 second? Meg, I have a lot of questions for you already that are related to my own practice. Yeah. And what would be great, I think, is so you talked a little bit about having kids ask the questions. And I'm wondering if, Lindsay, if you can talk about some of the benefits of having that student-teacher partnership, and maybe include some negotiated curriculum, and then we can have a space where we can ask some questions, because I have some definite questions about this. And then I also want to make sure, if somebody could write this down, that we don't forget about how proficiencies can support this work and how those can be integrated into it too. So, Meg, I like that idea. Again, if we could just kind of move the conversation from it, we can stay with the negotiated curriculum, but also talk about, Lindsay, the benefits of this kind of partnership and what you see in classrooms with it, and then also leave time for some questions.
Yeah, just to give you context too, Lindsay, we haven't looked at the quotes or the continuum of voice. So that might be some things that, when thinking about theory, those would be some helpful things to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I apologize for being delayed. The roads were a little messy. So when we're thinking about student partnership through project-based learning, or different ways that youth can lend their voice to their learning, I almost saw this as almost two different pieces, in that student, partnership, when we say partnership, that's one thing, and that's a shift in how both youth and adults think about their roles in their learning, and about their potential. And I think there has to be, first, before any of this, other pieces can, be really truly at the level of partnership, and we can get to that continuum in just a moment, but to get to that full partnership, there has to be a real shift in people's mental models about what they believe youth can do and what they believe adults can do. I think if we're thinking about youth involvement and student partnership in curriculum development, whether it's project-based learning, negotiated curriculum, partnership involves not just consulting, although that is a form of like student voice, but truly involving young people in the conversations around the curriculum or whatever school culture product they're addressing. And I think it also, with that shift in the mental models, it's important to note that, you know, adults need to realize and recognize that young people have a unique perspective and a specialized, you know, set of knowledge and skills and experiences that adults don't have. And that when we're working at a level of partnership, it's really respecting both, you know, respecting all those pieces, their perspective, the knowledge, the skills, etc., that youth bring to the table. And so I think to label it partnership, I would say you'd really have to look very deeply at what we as educators believe about ourselves and believe about young people. But then if we're talking about negotiated curriculum and or project-based learning, or both combined, and youth voice, there's certainly a continuum of youth engagement, and, you know, from consultation and asking young people, you know, for input and feedback, to participation and, you know, maybe not making decisions, but participation in, you know, guiding the direction. And then partnership is really, you know, when youth and adults are working together, it's with. And so is that connecting to what Meg said?
Yeah.
Or, okay, build some background there.
Lindsay,
yeah.
I think it definitely is. It just, you know, one of the questions I have is, how do you, like, when you were talking about building partnership, are we always talking about building partnership to develop a whole new curriculum? Or what might the partnership look like when you have to meet some of those standards, or you have to, you know, hit these units? Like, how do you what does that look like for teachers, where you're partnering with students to do things that you kind of have to do as a teacher in some cases, but you want to do with a lot more of the perspective, knowledge, and skills that you mentioned that young people can bring to the table?
Yeah, well, I think when you think about democratic curriculum, and that's our, you know, what we're always striving for, is to create democratic classrooms and communities. It's not a free-for-all. There are rules and laws and structures in society, just like there's structures in place in classrooms around curriculum and expectations. And so that's, I guess, that model that Meg was speaking to, the negotiated curriculum model. That's where that allows for, I think, negotiation, recognizes that we are indeed a democracy, and that it's a fair process for everyone's voice to be heard and to provide their input, but that there are still some have-tos, you know, like there's structures, there's, you know, there's curriculum, there's, you know, pieces that need to be addressed, but that also needs to be a transparent piece. So that has to be laid out there. This is our end goal. These are the standards or the proficiencies. This is where we need to get to, and you need to demonstrate proficiency in this area. Now, how are we going to do that? So then tapping into those unique perspective, skills, experiences, and, you know, and expertise of our young people to really think creatively, and being, you know, I just ran from another facilitation, but, you know, thinking about, you know, youth as inventors instead of just vessels to be filled. And, you know, in a democracy, there are rules, there are laws, there are, you know, structures in place so that we can be safe and supported and successful. And that's just like in a classroom or in a school. There's curriculum, there's expectations for learning, and proficiencies that need to be met. And so that's the idea of negotiation, that that might be different even from consultation, because consultations sometimes can turn into listening to young people, but then what happens after that is truly the most important piece. If you're listening to young people as consultants, are you then using that input to guide you the direction of what's happening in the classroom, or are you just checking off, I did my student voice and that's, check.
Right.
So I'm not even sure what the question was, Don, but okay, now I remember it now.
Yeah.
But I see, negotiated curriculum is a form of true democratic curriculum, and that's what we're striving for, is to really support our young people in understanding what a democracy is and what a fair process is. Is that fair process doesn't mean that we all get our way. It means that we have a voice in and input into the outcomes, and maybe sometimes we don't.
Can I add just one other thing about how this fits? How does, negotiated curriculum has been happening for a long time before we talked about learning targets and proficiencies, but where I think negotiated curriculum helps to amplify some of the foundational tenets of proficiency-based learning, and also as we strive to create more equitable systems within our schools, we're really looking at disassembling that black box. What do I need to do well? And I think negotiated curriculum is one of the most authentic ways of helping students understand partnering with students to help them understand what they need to do to be successful. And when you pair proficiencies with negotiated curriculum, it increases that transparency. It engages the identity of the students, and so it really embodies, it's one of the most authentic embodiments of those tenets of PBL. And so I think sometimes people wonder, like, how does this fit, or is this a different thing? It really is a way to amplify all those things that we're striving for.
So when you guys are talking about the negotiated curriculum, and I'll just put out a case study, is that one of the things that we're doing this year is we have some essential questions. What are the rights and responsibilities of citizens? What's the role of government? And how do we connect history to our lives today? And one of the things that we did is, pretty typical. We looked at the Constitution, we looked at the Bill of Rights, and I'm getting consultations from the kids where I'm asking them, is this interesting to you? Do you see the relevance? And they're responding, fairly positively. And now what I'm trying to do is identify some of the historical factors that led to the Civil War, so that they can see how issues of race, issues of inequality, how systemic injustice has historical roots, okay? And I guess my question is, what I'm doing is I'm building some background knowledge now so that they understand the causes, but then I want them to go out and explore the historical events on their own, whether that's the connection to music and the blues, the trends in music that we have, whether that's photography and art and how that influenced the perception of these historical events. So for teachers out there who are asking themselves, how am I, what should I do? Or what are the structures that I need to have in place to successfully help students kind of, all right, let's develop the curriculum together so that you can explore some of those unique perspectives, and I can help you do that. What does the panel think should be the approach for teachers who are kind of in that spot where they're setting the stage for having this negotiated curriculum? What do we do next? And what are some of those structures, Lindsay, that you would like to see in the classroom that identify that this really is a partnership and not just a consultation model? And this is for anybody to answer. Meg?
Sure, I can take that one. I didn't know if Lindsay was going to answer, but Don, I think in some ways I go back to what Maura was just saying about laying out those proficiencies. Like, if you've laid the foundation for here's some of the basic pieces of information that you need in order to explore these different topics, then I think the conversation with kids is, so how do we want to demonstrate our learning? What are the different ways that we want to communicate this learning? Like, who's the audience for this learning? What's the venue? Like, how is it relevant to today? And I think that's where some of those self and world questions we can go back to those, because it's like, these were some things you worried about poverty, you worried about equality, you're wondering about what those next things are. So how can we take the questions that you have and the learning that you've been exposed to and pull it all together to communicate this new learning? I don't know if that.
Another thing just to consider, a lot of the language and the proficiencies, when we look at them, they are typically task and topic neutral. So students could have a variety of different pieces of evidence to show their growth. So that's what I mean by task. Students could be doing different things to show their understanding of the proficiency. But then they oftentimes are topic neutral as well. And so it's a skill that can be applied. They really are transferable skills. They're skills that can be applied to different times in history or different personal pathways. And so by having that proficiency language there, that's sometimes where, from that, as Meg was saying, partnering and saying, how are we, what are our wonderings about this topic? How could we show our growth towards developing this skill, and having the skill be one of the common places, and then from that, letting the kids do some of the driving on the topic or the evidence.
So I just have a follow-up question. So when you give them the skills, are you then saying do you co-construct the rubrics with the kids, or what does that look like?
Again, Kev, I feel like if I'm shutting you down. So how we do it for us is, I think in part because as teachers, we're still trying to make sense of what we don't want the target language or the scale language to be. We want kids to know what it means to meet any level of the target. And so we don't want that to be a secret, but we also want that translated into a task so that kids can understand that, well, this is transferable. The work that we want you to do for this particular task is here's the scale of the language. And we don't necessarily negotiate that part with kids, but what we do is try to share work samples with kids that they have generated or that another class has generated to help match work to the target, so that they can see, oh, this is what you mean when you say provides multiple pieces of evidence to show cause effect or whatever it is. So we try to just say, this is what that looks like in those particular things. And again, it's not necessarily negotiated, but it is like, it is being transparent. It's like, hey, this is where, this is the work that you've done in the past. And, once we sort it, we can unpack the differences between the work and make it easier for them to make sense out of, to know where they're going.
Okay. Kevin, how about you? What does the negotiation look like in your classroom?
Yeah, just you've all made points that I would definitely have said. The point that Maura was saying, just how proficiencies definitely, they allow more flexibility with this whole negotiated piece. And I like what Meg was saying, and a lot of things that we do, it almost feels like using a mentor text in like a writing class or some different setting there, where we have our kids kind of feel out. We use a 4-point rubric, and they feel out what a 1 is, what a 2 is, what a 3 is, 4. And then, we get into that negotiated piece. So again, there are some, I think, non-negotiables from a teacher standpoint, but in terms of structures, Don, you were talking about, I think what's one of the most important things is the kids have to see that they're being heard early on. Like they have to see like, oh, we didn't just have this conversation, like somebody mentioned earlier, we just checked our boxes. Yep, we listened to what our kids had to say, and then we did our own teacher thing anyway. So I think it's really important that you have it set within your system, that it's really clear early and often in a unit or in a lesson, that they're being heard, and like making it really explicit. Like, this is, we're now getting into what you guys came up with, or the themes that you generated, and, creating public records around that thing. So like their work is present, their ideas are present in the classroom. For me, like a big thing across all content areas, just coming back to that. So again, it's not like, yep, we're checking boxes, and then maybe at the end they get to pick what project they want to do, but it's present throughout the whole unit.
And I was just to add on. Sometimes I would think it'd be the model that both Meg and myself use, that's adapted from Bean. It starts the year with the kids thinking about their questions and concerns they have about themselves and the world. And when you set the tone with that model from day one, where you're asking kids to really actually ask the questions that they're most curious about, and not just these, random questions, about a particular topic, and then using those to guide thinking and planning throughout the year. But if you set the culture of your classroom or your team from day one using a model like, the modified Bean model, or the Bean, whatever model it is, I think it establishes a really clear culture for, this is how we do things here. We listen to one another. We, your questions are valuable, and we're going to be finding ways to answer them, or dive into big themes connected to your questions.
How do you, so Meg and Lindsay, and I know Maura and Kevin also have had a lot of experience with incorporating student voice into their classroom learning communities. What do you see as the benefits of doing that? So you have teachers out there who are kind of probably nervous about doing this, about turning over sort of the keys to the kids. What are some of the benefits that you've seen in your classroom and with your teaching? And could you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think number one is increased engagement. Mm-hmm. People, I think also just it's not necessarily turning over the keys, because in a partnership, you're doing it with one another, you're working together. So I think folks need to recognize that there's still like a high level of structure, control, expectations, not control meaning like I'm controlling you, but that there is a feeling of safety and security in what's happening. But there's also that respect for one another's ideas and thoughts, and that we all have something to bring to the table. So it's actually that deep listening. So I would caution people not to think that they're just turning over the keys, because if that happens, it turns into like a really permissive environment where people are just people are feeling unsafe because they don't really know what's expected. And so it's really that high structure, accountability, and expectations, along with deep listening, respect, and honoring the voice of everyone. And then I forget what the question was.
What are the benefits
in my brain
in your
benefits? Yeah. So again, like already the relationships that you create with your students become way different, because you're truly listening and valuing their interests, experiences, skills. And so when someone feels like they are, that there's someone that cares about them, then they want to be there, and so the level of engagement increases. And I think really, if we're thinking about, modeling the way that we teach, around what does it look like to teach in a democratic classroom or a democratic school, the level of empowerment mm-hmm. really increases too. So not just engagement, you want to move into, to empowerment. And when that's modeled, and that folks feel like they actually do have a voice and they are being listened to, even if it's not the idea that's chosen, but they have input in the process, the level of empowerment to make change or to dive in and persevere, all the mindset pieces that we really care so deeply about increase as well. So just that engagement piece that was actually in the beginning of our rationale around the 4 components of it, with they're more, they pay attention to the task, they're more committed, they're persistent, and they're wanting to find meaning and value in a task because it's relevant, it feels engaging, etc.
Okay, Kevin and Meg, what are the benefits, and Maura, what are the benefits that you see in classrooms that incorporate this negotiated curriculum, etc.?
Yeah, I think Lindsay definitely hit on the ones I was going to mention, which around relationships, trust, and engagement. I think are the 3 huge benefits that come through this. And again, I feel like teachers who aren't ready to just say like, yep, we're just going to wholesale dive into negotiated curriculum. Because even on Swift, like I wouldn't say we're a negotiated curriculum team, but we do a lot of pieces of it in different ways. And one way that Lindsay was just making me think is you start the school year to create an environment that empowers learners to know that even if you're doing something that isn't negotiated, so maybe it is teacher directed, students feel really comfortable to let their voice be heard. So, for instance, if I'm moving forward with a social studies theme or topic, and that is a teacher directed, piece, my students know like, hey, like I really want to try doing this, and they are very confident and comfortable doing that. I think that comes through a lot of things. I know, like from our standpoint, we do our camp out in the beginning of the year. That's all student led. All of our PLPs are student led. The student conferences, again, they advocate for themselves, reflect. And we have like a student council that makes a lot of big decisions. So I think it's so present in our culture that it just, for us, it doesn't, even though we're not just like everything's negotiated, we don't do the whole theme-based thing with Bean, which I wish we could. I think it'd be great to get to that point at some point. But I feel like we're at a place where our kids feel empowered and they feel comfortable with having their voices be heard with their teachers.
Yeah, I just wanted to, as I was listening to what everyone's been saying, I think the students gained so much. And also when we think about the transferable skills, they're given the stage to really practice those things. So as Kevin was saying about self-advocacy, I think a lot of times what I would experience when maybe we were doing something that was teacher directed, a student might say, could I do this in this way? Or I actually been thinking about this and I think I want to try this. And so it teaches students, how to ask questions and how to partner. I think we have to create spaces, intentional spaces for the youth adult partnerships. We can't rely on students just to come up to us and say, I want to do it this way. It has to be part of how we operate. But I think, between self-reflection and saying, I set out to do this thing, where am I right now? What changes do I need to make? So all of those, we call them scholarly habits, if you call them transferable skills, they're all really embedded in this work. And I just think that it also increases might sound a little silly, but it increases the teacher's engagement in the work that you're doing as well. Like when you have really engaged students, you become more engaged in your work. And so I think that there's also a huge benefit to the teacher in the partnerships. And sometimes I feel like selfishly I would leave the day and I would have benefited so much from doing it. And I would really draw energy from my students when working on negotiated curriculum. And so I think there's a lot for the teacher to benefit as well.
I was just going to add, can I just add one little thing, Don?
Yep.
Just because I feel like it's so important in that, if I've been doing this for whatever, 25 years, whatever it is, that I have never, I've never been more like blown away by the capacity of what kids care and worry about. And their compassion for one another when they start to really look at what their common self and world questions are. That when, that just by the invitation of asking them to think about those big ideas, shows them that, not only do we care about what you wonder about, but you are a compassionate human being, or you are a knowledgeable human being, or you have the capacity for this. And, maybe in their lives, they're adolescents and they're wondering and they're messing with a lot of stuff. They have a lot of things on their mind. And it's so exciting to see what they worry about and to see where their interests and their concerns and what they strive for, what they want to see in their world. It's just such a powerful process, and I think now more than ever does help set them up for their future, because they do need to know, like, hey, how do I navigate these waters? And I may not be able to achieve all of these things, but I know I have the capacity to think deeply about something or to care deeply about something. And I think that just gives them a little, if you can set that up in your classroom, like, you're halfway there. And it doesn't mean losing control or anything like that. It's just really powerful.
And if I just want to say ditto to everything Meg just said, and also that what's so incredible about the process is that you'll find that, you're like, that's a question you care about? Me too. And it's like, it humanizes. It's like, it's not just like adults and youth in these different compartments. It's like, I care about that as well. Oh, I want to know more about that. So it really, sparked I learned more in my 10 years of the Edge because of those questions, I think, in my entire lifetime, because we were able to go there. And I was like, I want to know about that too. Like, that's, important to me as well. So it's finding that common ground too, that we all have something that we can bring to the table, and we have a lot of commonalities too.
I think those are all excellent points. And I know that we had talked about models, and I just want to reiterate that the discussions that we have once a month are really a model for me about what professional learning or development, or whatever you want to call it, should look like. Because as you're talking, I'm listening and I'm hearing things in ways that I haven't heard them before. And that's the kind of thing that drives me crazy. Where Lindsay said, oh, we have this in common. And I just want to make a few points from what you've said. And I just, and then I'll ask for some comments. One of the things I think that's really important that all of you mentioned, and again, that I think would be helpful for teachers out there, is this idea of sort of explicit structured opportunities. I think Maura brought that up. And so somebody was talking about like these leadership opportunities. It might have been Lindsay, like giving kids, no, sorry, it was Kevin, the leadership on the camping and these different elements, giving kids opportunities that you structure that allow them to take the lead so that they have practice relative to leading small projects, and then they get used to being trusted, and they get used to making those decisions in the classroom. So, if I'm writing down notes, I was going to make a bullet point of these intentional spaces. Somebody else mentioned intentional space for leadership opportunities. Somebody else mentioned asking good questions, which is a transferable skill. So that could be a lesson, asking good questions. How are you, what's a good question? And what is a question that can lead you into this inquiry? Meg started this whole conversation with questions about the world and ourselves. And so asking those good questions, that's a transferable skill. I also heard people talking, I think Maura was talking about the transferable skills and being explicit with that. So how is organization going to help you achieve this goal in your project, right? And so talking to kids about, in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish, to answer the question that you've come up with, you need to have these skills in organization. So having these explicit instruction in some of the transferable skills that either they choose or you choose, I think is really important. And then I think we mentioned this quickly in passing, but this idea that students always have to be reflecting. So having a key reflection part, I think needs to be explicit, and it needs to be repeated all the time. I want to connect back to our last webinar where we talked about the importance of feedback, and how, as Kevin mentioned, if you set it up right away so that students get used to their feedback being honored and respected and incorporated, that feedback can be part of the reflection. So in your conversation, all of you mentioned these key pieces, these intentional spaces, explicit with the transferable skills, leadership opportunities, asking good questions. All of those are foundational pieces, I believe, to getting to a negotiated curriculum. And then the last thing I want to say is that, this is a completely new realization, and I can't believe I didn't think of this before this evening. When Meg talked about the self and world questions, and Lindsay's mentioned this that's part of her practice. And I'm wondering why I don't have that at the beginning of the year. Have the kids put that on their PLP, maybe the exploration. And then as you're moving through your curriculum, saying to the kids, are there self and world questions that fit in to this space? And should we be looking at some of these questions that we all have in common? So, for example, if a kid has a question about racism in the 21st century, is that something that could apply to a unit on the Civil War or the Constitution or equality? And why haven't I been doing that? And that's the sort of thing that it's really important to have these conversations, because eventually it might take you a while to figure it out. But to me, why haven't I been doing that? So that kids can go tap back into those questions throughout the year. And in that way, it doesn't have to be a project or, a specific project all about those questions, but they can start making connections, which is also a transferable skill and also something that could really benefit them across the curriculum and across their lives as well.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we kept our self and world questions hung up all year. So, it was like, we're not taking these down. Like, this is the heart of what we do. And so when we start thinking about something new, go back to your questions, and revisit them and think about what questions would align with what we're doing.
And also just within those questions too, you could have, what are the big words like justice or
Right.
equality or
themes.
fairness?
That's the whole extracting themes. I mean, you could even do that at the beginning of the year which is the negotiated curriculum process, like Bean's model, where you do the self and world, you look for commonalities, you extract themes, and then you think about how do these themes and questions align with our curriculum, the curriculum that is mandated.
Correct. And I again, through these conversations, as you work these out, I think I misspoke, like turning over the keys. I think you're absolutely right, Lindsay, that you have to have these structures that make kids feel secure and safe. I think that's so important. And some of these, excuse me, as we're teasing out these structures, I think that becomes important for people to recognize that those foundations can lead to this negotiated curriculum that we're discussing. I just have a quick question that I'd like people to speak to. What are the resources that you're using to develop these ideas?
I use Lindsay's resources and Meg's and more.
Are there books, or are there professional resources or advocates for this type of learning that you look to? I know that Lindsay, your video that we posted on PLP Pathways was an awesome lead into the negotiated curriculum. But when you're talking about Bean, what title?
Yeah, there's great articles that we can share through PLP Pathways and pass along that Bean has written, and other great education thinkers. And the thing is, it's like, this is nothing new. I think Meg said that earlier. But, it's like Bean said this, how many years ago, Meg? 35, 40?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this is not earth-shattering. In fact, if it was earth-shattering, it's time for people to recognize that this is pedagogical, beliefs and theory and research that is, has demonstrated over time an increase in engagement in young people. And so I mean, there's definitely people are looking for the theory, the research. There's, there's articles out there that we could share. People are looking for models. I mean, I think, we've got Meg and Kevin and you, Don, here that are doing this work in your classroom. And there's probably so many other folks. I know Kyle was going to join us. Is he not able to join us?
No.
Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
Kyle got caught up. I think the same roads that slowed you up have slowed him down, but
It's bad out there, people. It's not a pretty ride. Yeah. So, and I imagine his roads are probably pretty bad. So yeah, I mean, I think Kyle's another great example of someone who also went to the Middle Grades Institute, heard about these ideas, and has transformed his practice in many ways, and is just doing it. It's like, you got to just do it. But it also, you have to ensure that the first thing is that you really are changing your mental model. Like, do I really believe this? Because you really need to believe it before you go for it, because you're just going to fall back into the old patterns, even, if you don't truly believe it. And sometimes there's many of us that believe it, but it's scary to change the way we've done things for years. But if the most important piece is changing that mental model.
And again, so you've brought that up a couple times, this idea of mental models, and I've heard this before, and just kind of where, when you talk about a mental model, is there, what exactly does that mean? And what, someone who hears that term, mental model, what is that, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. So what it means, and I actually linked, and we can share this out, the Youth Adult Partnership Roadmap to Agency. It will also just kind of break down some of that language too. But a mental model is like basically your belief system. Like, I believe that, that quality education is done to and for students. And I believe that youth do not have the life experience or wisdom to position them as decision makers, or I believe that, that in schools, adults should assume full power and that youth should be compliant. So that's a mental model. And on the other side, I believe that youth and adults, that youth input will, with full participation in decision making is a basic human need and right. Or I believe that partnership and shared responsibility are essential to quality education. So it's about your belief system in regards to both education and the role of youth and adults in education. And, we're all somewhere along that roadmap or that continuum at various times. It's not like, you're here or you're there. But you have to be open to shifting your mental models in order to make these changes in your classroom practices.
And Maura, I know that you're responsible for a lot of the professional development in your district, and I'm wondering how do you support teachers as they're moving towards this work or moving through this work, and what is your recommendation for professional development? Or I know you made some great points about how it ties to proficiencies. What do you do to encourage teachers with this, or how do you support teachers who are moving through this work?
I think where we are right now, we're in the midst of sort of a massive change process systemically, both with Act 77, but then there are also some other factors. And so right now we're really looking at, we talk a lot about our curriculum design, our instructional design for learning, and thinking about how do we increase student engagement in that instructional design. We have different teachers who are through different professional development. Some of them are working on, the cultivating pathways to sustainability, and they're using some of the UN sustainable goals in different ways. But in terms of, systemically, we're really not having that conversation just based on where people are in the process. I would say, as Lindsay was talking about, sort of how it can feel overwhelming to take that step. So after you've sort of looked at your mental model, and saying, is this what I believed? Is this what I believe about students? And then taking that first step. When I was doing this work, I was lucky enough to take this step with a team, and the team that I was on. And I truly believe that that team that I was on, when we took that step together, it created the strongest team that I have ever worked on, because I think we really had to identify what we believed about kids and about learning and about how we engage youth. And I think that, and I also think that we were partnering with kids and partnering with each other and just drawing so much energy from each other that it was really powerful. So I think if you are about to take that step or you've been considering it, find your partner. And either that's someone who's on your team or someone who's in your school who you can share in this work with, because I do think it really, it not only builds relationships between the students and the teacher, but it builds relationships between teachers. And so I think as we're thinking about like how do you take that first step, that would be definitely something that I would say.
Awesome. We're almost at closing, and I'm going to ask, we just have a couple events that we need to highlight. Also, PLP Pathways, again, is an organization designed for teachers to support teachers. And we had a little conversation, Lindsay, before the broadcast about the Middle Grades Institute, the conference that's happening on Saturday. Hopefully everybody's going to get there. And as an organization, if you guys could just maybe print out that evaluation tool, Maura had brought that up, and maybe we can just have a discussion or a check-in and a little reflection about how we're doing so far this year. I think that would be great. And then we do have a panel discussion apparently at 1:45, and some of you will also be hosting some of the sessions. And for me, I always think that the conference is a great way to kind of reconnect and get rejuvenated and get excited about what's happening down the road. So I just wanted to kind of quickly point out, and anybody else can join in, that on January 29th, oh, actually, let me see if there's one that's earlier. So January 12th, this Saturday, is the Middle Grades Conference at UVM at the Davis Center. I believe it starts at 9:30 till 3:30, and I'm sure that they'll allow walk-in registrations. January 29th, Vermont Learning for the Future, Learn, Connect, Act, Transforming Education for Equity, Sustainability, and Joy. Those are great conferences. They're very, Lindsay, do you want to talk about what you appreciate about those conferences?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get inspired and connected, with good, positive ideas and energy, this is a place to go. It's a free, open summit for anyone connected to education. There's so many exciting things happening at the summit, including we will be viewing Bess O'Brien's new film, I Am From Here, which is also sponsored by the Vermont NEA and the Racial Justice Alliance work that they're doing. And so we'll be screening the film. It's a 30-minute film, and we'll have folks from the film there. There'll be all sorts of workshops and ways to connect with folks that are working on education pre-K through 16 in Vermont. It's just a really great place to be. And if you want to register, it's free, like I said, which is always wonderful. And we can share, the link is on this doc, so we can share the link.
Okay. And then there's also, it looks like there's some, Up for Learning is sponsoring professional development sessions on February 5th. Is that correct?
On February 4th, Russell Quaglia, who's kind of a renowned thinker and facilitator around student voice and aspirations. He'll be presenting at the Hampton Inn. And then on the 5th, there is a follow-up component to that where it's, Up will be facilitating that one at the Hampton Inn, Youth Voice, and really diving deeply into the Youth Adult Partnership piece.
So if you're interested in some of the things that we've talked about this afternoon, those would be two professional development opportunities. And then the Family Beyond Bullying Conference, Meg and Maura, are you guys going to be going to that one? Meg, are you going to that one?
I am.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Meg, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. This is our annual conference that we have every year. It's an opportunity for teachers to partner with their students to come to the conference to experience a variety of workshops related to tolerance, to understanding relationships. I don't have the, Lindsay, you can help me with the titles of some of the workshops, but the most powerful thing about this is that teachers and kids come together to this conference to create an action plan that they can then bring back to their schools about affecting change, about changing the culture in their schools. That's from the, from students up. It's like kids come away with ideas about how to change the culture in their school to develop, to break down the barriers and to develop a more open, caring, joyful community.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I would just add that many of the workshops are either co-facilitated or facilitated by youth.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate the work. Once again, you left me a lot of things to think about and ponder in my own practice. I will see everybody on Saturday at the middle grades conference. I'm looking forward to that. And does anybody have any last announcements or things they want to mention? Okay. Thank you all very much. I hope your re-entry into teaching after the break has been successful and relaxing. Had a snow day yesterday. And I will see you on Saturday. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening and a safe drive home.